Welcome back to Infidelity Tales Lab. We're incredibly grateful for your support. Before we begin today's tale, tell us, which city or country are you joining us from? We love connecting with our global audience. Now, let's dive into today's story. Chapter 1. Foundations of Sand. Mason Hargrove had built his life on three principles: hard work, loyalty, and family. At 42, he'd transformed from a construction worker to the owner of Cornerstone Development, a modestly successful construction company in Portland. The calluses on his hands told the story of his rise, never afraid to work alongside his crew when needed, earning their respect with sweat equity. His relationship with Vanessa had been a whirlwind. They'd met at a charity auction 5 years ago, where Mason had donated construction services to renovate a women's shelter. Vanessa Reynolds, then 34 and recently divorced, had been coordinating the event. With her copper hair and sharp green eyes, she commanded attention. Mason had been captivated by her confidence, her apparent passion for community work, and the way she'd laughed at his awkward attempts at small talk. "Most men in your position send representatives," she'd said. "You showed up yourself." "I like to see where my work goes," he'd replied. Their courtship had been brief, 4 months from first date to wedding. Mason had welcomed Vanessa's daughter, Lily, then 13, into their family with open arms. He'd never had children of his own and embraced the chance to be a father figure. Even if Lily remained distant, her loyalty firmly with her biological father, a pharmaceutical sales rep named Dennis who lived in Seattle and sent expensive gifts but rarely visited. Now, as Mason surveyed the construction site of what would be the Riverside Plaza, his company's largest project to date, he couldn't shake the feeling that something was off at home. Vanessa's recent coldness, her increasing charity committee meetings, the growing credit card bills for restaurants he'd never visited. "Boss, we need to inspect this support beam," called Diego Fuentes, his foreman and trusted right hand for over a decade. "Something doesn't look right with the angle." Mason nodded, pushing personal concerns aside. "Let's take a look." They climbed the scaffold together, Diego pointing out the slight but concerning misalignment in the support structure. "Good catch," Mason said, examining the junction. This could have caused problems down there. The splintering crack came first, a sound like a gunshot that made both men freeze. Then the sickening lurch as the scaffold platform gave way beneath them. Mason remembered reaching for Diego, their fingertips brushing before gravity claimed them both. The world spun in sickening rotation. His body slammed against steel beams on the way down, each impact like a sledgehammer. The final collision with concrete knocked consciousness away like a light being switched off. His last thought before darkness took him: Vanessa will be worried. The hospital room was sterile white when Mason first opened his eyes. The pain in his body, dulled by what he would later learn, was a significant dose of morphine. A fractured pelvis, 3 broken ribs, a punctured lung, and a severe concussion. The doctor recited his injuries like reading a grocery list. Diego had fared better, escaping with a broken arm and leg. The investigation would later reveal that the scaffold had been improperly secured, though Mason's company had followed all safety protocols. A manufacturing defect in a key component would eventually be identified as the cause. Through bleary eyes, Mason scanned the room for Vanessa. Instead, he found his sister Wanda sitting beside his bed, her usually immaculate business attire rumpled, dark circles under her eyes suggesting she'd been there for hours. "Where's Vanessa?" His voice came out as a rasp. Wanda's expression tightened. "I called her yesterday when they brought you in. She said she was in the middle of something important and would try to come later." "And Lily?" "School trip, apparently." Mason nodded slowly, the movement sending pain through his skull despite the painkillers. "What day is it?" "Wednesday. You've been here since Monday afternoon." 2 days, and his wife hadn't visited once. Mason told himself there must be a reasonable explanation. Vanessa had never been good with hospitals. Perhaps she was arranging things at home for his return, or dealing with some crisis at one of her charitable organizations. "Your phone's been buzzing," Wanda said, handing him the device. "Someone named Terrence has called 4 times. Terrence Walsh was Mason's attorney and golf buddy. Seeing the missed calls, Mason felt a flicker of concern. Can you give me a minute? Wanda squeezed his hand gently and stepped out. Mason dialed Terrence back, wincing as he shifted to hold the phone to his ear. Mason, Jesus, I've been trying to reach you. Terrence's usually measured tone was elevated with urgency. I'm in the hospital. Construction accident. Shit, are you okay? I'll live. What's going on? A hesitation on the line. This is awkward. I was at Riverdale Country Club yesterday for a meeting with the Hendersons. I saw Vanessa there. Okay. Mason prompted, a cold feeling spreading in his chest. She was with Brendan Norwood. Mason knew the name immediately. Brendan Norwood was the owner of Pinnacle Properties, Cornerstone's main competitor and the company that had narrowly lost the bid for the Riverside Plaza project. They looked intimate, Mason. Very intimate. The kind of intimate that made me uncomfortable enough to call you. I'm sorry, man. The cold feeling crystallized into something hard and sharp. How long were they there? At least 2 hours. They left together. After ending the call, Mason stared at the ceiling, memories clicking into place like puzzle pieces forming a picture he hadn't wanted to see. Late nights, unexplained expenses, new lingerie he never saw, the sudden password on her phone. He called home. No answer. Then Vanessa's cell. Hello. Her voice sounded annoyed at the interruption. It's me. I'm in the hospital. A beat of silence. Oh, I heard from Wanda. How are you feeling? No apology for not visiting. No concern in her tone. Why haven't you come to see me? The question came out more vulnerable than he intended. Her sigh crackled through the connection. Mason, I've been swamped with the charity auction planning. And honestly, what good would it do? You're getting medical care. I'd just be sitting there. The coldness in her voice struck him like a physical blow. I could have died, Vanessa. But you didn't. Look, I've got the committee breathing down my neck, and Lily's been acting up again. I just don't have the energy to drive across town for a hospital visit. You're not worth the gas money. Die fast or heal quick, but I got my own problems. Mason felt something break inside him, something more fundamental than bones. Before he could respond, he heard a commotion on the other end of the line, and then Lily's voice came through, sharp and venomous. I hope you die. He hung up, the phone slipping from his suddenly numb fingers. Wanda found him 10 minutes later, stone-faced and silent. She took one look at him and knew something had changed. Mason. He turned to her, his eyes dry but somehow emptier than she'd ever seen them. I need a favor, sis. A big one. Chapter 2. Silent Calculations. 3 weeks into his hospital stay, Mason had become a model patient on the surface, following physical therapy instructions, taking medications dutifully, thanking the nurses with quiet politeness. But beneath this compliant exterior, his mind had transformed into a ledger of betrayals, each entry calculated with cold precision. Vanessa had not visited once. 3 text messages, all variations of "hope you're feeling better," with the hollow automation of someone messaging an acquaintance. Lily hadn't communicated at all. What had initially felt like a knife to the heart had calcified into something harder, colder. Wanda visited daily, becoming his eyes and ears to the outside world. Through her, Mason had arranged a chain of discoveries that confirmed his suspicions. The private investigator she hired documented Vanessa's frequent meetings with Brendan Norwood, capturing photos of intimate dinners, a weekend trip to a coastal resort, passionate embraces in the parking garage beneath Norwood's downtown office. How long has this been going on? Mason asked, studying the surveillance photos Wanda had smuggled into his hospital room. According to Roth, at least 6 months, Wanda replied, referring to the private investigator. Possibly longer. 6 months. Half a year of lies. Mason nodded, adding this to his mental calculations. There's more. Wanda hesitated. I had Terrence pull your financial records, like you asked. She handed him a folder containing bank statements, credit card bills, and investment portfolio summaries. Mason flipped through them methodically, his expression unchanging as he absorbed the evidence of Vanessa's financial betrayal. Large withdrawals from their joint account. Credit card charges for hotels and restaurants on days she'd claimed to be at charity events. A suspicious transfer of $50,000 to an account he didn't recognize. She's been bleeding you dry, Wanda said, unable to keep the anger from her voice. And there's this. The final document was a copy of a loan application with Norwood's signature as co-applicant and Vanessa's as primary borrower. They were trying to secure funding for a new business venture, a high-end spa and wellness center called Rejuvenate. Using your credit to fund a business with her lover, Wanda's voice dripped with disgust. While you're in the hospital, Mason stared at the document for a long moment, then carefully returned it to the folder. Have Terrence block the loan. Quietly. Already done. But Mason, what are you going to do? He looked up at his sister, his eyes reflecting a coldness she'd never seen before. I'm going to get better. Then I'm going to take back what's mine. And Vanessa? She'll get exactly what she deserves. That night, after Wanda left, Mason made 2 calls. The first was to Oliver Preston, his company's operations manager. Oliver, I need you to implement Contingency Plan Delta, effective immediately. There was a pause on the line. Are you sure, boss? That's the nuclear option. I'm sure. Use the secure server protocols we established. Authorization code 7729 alpha. Consider it done. And Mason, whatever's happening, we've got your back. The second call was to his banker, Victor Saldana, a man who'd helped finance Mason's first construction project when no one else would take a chance on him. Victor, remember that conversation we had last year about worst-case scenarios? I do. Victor's voice was grave. Is it time? It's time. Execute the Asset Protection Protocol. Every account, every investment. Leave the primary checking with enough to avoid suspicion, but secure everything else. What about the property transfers we discussed? Mason thought of the house he'd renovated with his own hands, the home he believed he was building for a future with Vanessa and Lily. All of them, including the house. After hanging up, Mason lay in the darkness of his hospital room, pain medication dulling the physical aches, but doing nothing for the hollow feeling in his chest. He thought of the day he'd proposed to Vanessa, kneeling despite his bad knee from an old construction injury. The way she'd cried and said he was the stability she'd always wanted. A bitter laugh escaped him, pulling painfully at his healing ribs. He'd been nothing but a stepping stone for her, a convenient provider while she positioned herself for something better. Well, he'd show her what happened when the stepping stone became a landslide. The next morning, a nurse found Mason's bed empty. He had discharged himself against medical advice, leaving behind only a brief note for his doctor. Time to heal at home. But Mason Hargrove had no intention of going home. Chapter 3. Ghost Operations. Mason's disappearance was methodical, not impulsive. The Safe House, a modest 2-bedroom condo in Vancouver, Washington, just across the Columbia River from Portland, had been purchased 3 years earlier through an LLC connected to his construction business, ostensibly as temporary housing for visiting consultants. In reality, it was Mason's insurance policy, a contingency he'd never expected to need. Wanda met him there the day he left the hospital, bringing supplies and his dog, Brick, a barrel-chested chocolate lab, who greeted Mason with frantic joy, seemingly unconcerned by the walking cane his master now required. She hasn't even noticed you're gone, Wanda reported, setting down grocery bags in the kitchen. Too busy with Norwood, I guess. She called me yesterday, asking if I'd heard from you, like it was an afterthought. And you said that I assumed you were still in the hospital where she should have been visiting her husband. Wanda's tone made it clear what she thought of her sister-in-law. I didn't tell her I helped you check out. Mason nodded, lowering himself carefully onto the couch, his body still protesting every movement. Good. What about the company? Oliver has implemented everything exactly as planned. Decision-making authority has been transferred to the contingency team. On paper, you're on medical leave with limited involvement. In reality, I'm still running things, just invisibly, Mason finished. Cornerstone Development had been Mason's life for 15 years. He'd built it from nothing, weathering economic downturns and fierce competition through strategic planning and contingency preparations. Those same preparations were now protecting it, and him, from Vanessa's machinations. The transfer of assets is complete, Wanda continued, pulling out her tablet to show him the confirmations. The offshore accounts are secure. The property transfers have been backdated appropriately. All perfectly legal, just strategically timed. Victor was thorough. And the surveillance? Wanda tapped her tablet, bringing up a series of video feeds from cameras hidden throughout the Hargrove residence. Mason watched as Vanessa moved through their kitchen, phone pressed to her ear, gesturing animatedly. He turned up the volume. Doesn't matter where he is right now, Brendan. This is our opportunity. With him laid up, we can move forward with Rejuvenate without interference. His signature is easy enough to forward for the smaller documents, and Terrence Walsh hasn't returned my calls about the loan. Mason turned down the volume, having heard enough. Has she checked any of the accounts? Not yet. She's still using the credit cards, though. Spent $900 at Nordstrom yesterday. A thin smile crossed Mason's face. Let her dig the hole deeper. Vanessa had access to their joint checking account and her own credit cards, but was unaware that Mason had moved their savings, investments, and retirement funds into protected accounts days earlier. She was spending money that would soon evaporate like morning dew. Over the next 2 weeks, Mason operated like a general planning a complex military campaign. From his safe house command center, he directed a multi-pronged strategy designed to reclaim control of his life while systematically dismantling Vanessa's schemes. Through Oliver, he maintained oversight of Cornerstone's operations while appearing to be disengaged. Through Victor, he monitored Vanessa's spending and blocked her attempts to access larger funds. Through his attorney Terrence, he prepared the legal framework that would soon crash down on her like a collapsing building. And through the private investigator Roth, he gathered evidence, not just of Vanessa's affair, but of something potentially more damaging, her involvement in what appeared to be an insurance fraud scheme with Norwood. They've been targeting distressed properties, Roth explained during a secure video call, sharing documents he'd obtained. Norwood buys them cheap through shell companies. Vanessa's charity organization renovates them using inflated invoices. Then they file insurance claims for unforeseen damage during renovation. The insurance payouts go to another shell company they control. Mason studied the documents, connecting dots that had previously seemed unrelated. How long? At least 2 years. Started small, got more ambitious. The Rejuvenate Spa looks like their biggest play yet. They need your credit and connections for it. But once it's established, they probably run the same scheme there. 2 years. Their entire marriage had been a con. Keep digging, Mason instructed. I want everything documented, every transaction, every meeting, every phone call. On the 28th day after his hospital discharge, exactly 1 month since the scaffold collapse, Mason initiated the final phase of his plan. A text message to Wanda set things in motion. Time to come home. Chapter 4. Empty Spaces. Vanessa Reynolds Hargrove sped home through Portland's afternoon drizzle, her thoughts racing faster than her Mercedes. Mason's unexplained absence had finally forced her to visit the hospital that morning, only to discover he'd checked himself out nearly a month ago. None of the staff knew where he'd gone. His cell phone went straight to voicemail. His sister Wanda had responded to her panic call with cold satisfaction. Oh, now you're concerned? How interesting. Behind the wheel, Vanessa's manicured nails tapped in anxious rhythm. This wasn't part of the plan. Mason was supposed to be recovering, distracted, manageable, while she and Brendan secured financing for Rejuvenate. Instead, he'd vanished, and strange things were happening with their accounts. Her last attempt to withdraw money for the spa's permit fees had been denied. Insufficient funds in an account that should have held over $200,000. Pulling into the driveway of their craftsman-style home, Vanessa felt the first real stirrings of alarm. Mason's truck wasn't there, but something else was missing too, the familiar bark of Brick greeting her arrival. The dog was annoyingly devoted to Mason, but always home. The house felt wrong the moment she stepped inside, too silent, too still. Moving from room to room with growing unease, Vanessa began to catalog the absences. Mason's clothes, his books, his tools, the vintage record player he'd restored, Brick's bed and toys. The safe in the office stood open and empty. No, she muttered, rushing to their bedroom. The closet door slid open to reveal bare hangers where Mason's suits had hung. His nightstand was cleared of the reading glasses, paperback novels, and hand cream for his work-roughened skin. In the bathroom, his electric razor, cologne, and even his toothbrush were gone. Not just gone for a few days. Gone completely. Vanessa sank onto the edge of the bed, pulse hammering as she pulled out her phone to call Brendan. "He's gone," she said when he answered. Mason's cleared out his things. "Calm down." Brendan's smooth voice held an edge of irritation. "Where would he go? How should I know? I need to check the accounts again. Something's not right." After hanging up, Vanessa booted up the desktop computer in the home office and found another shock. Her login credentials were denied. After 3 failed attempts, a message appeared. "This account has been suspended. Please contact your system administrator." "Son of a bitch," she hissed, grabbing her laptop instead. The banking website accepted her login, but the account summary made her blood run cold. Their joint checking account contained $2,732.19, enough to avoid triggering any automatic notifications, but a fraction of what should have been there. The savings account showed a 0 balance. The investment portfolio link returned an error message. With trembling fingers, Vanessa called the bank's customer service line. After verifying her identity, she asked about the savings account. "I'm showing that account was closed 3 weeks ago, Mrs. Hargrove," the representative said pleasantly. "The funds were transferred to another institution. I don't have details on the destination." "That's impossible. I didn't authorize that." "The transfer was authorized by the primary account holder, Mr. Mason Hargrove." Primary account holder. Of course. She'd never bothered to have herself added as a joint holder on most of their accounts, seeing no need when Mason handled the finances and never questioned her spending. Vanessa ended the call and immediately tried her credit card for an online purchase. Declined. The second card. Declined. The third, her personal card from before the marriage, went through, but its limit was a modest $5,000, much of which was already used. As the implications sank in, Vanessa's phone buzzed with a text from an unknown number. "Front porch. You should see this." Confused, she went to the door and found a manila envelope on the welcome mat. Inside was a single sheet of paper, a notice of property transfer filed with Multnomah County. According to the document, ownership of their home had been transferred 3 years earlier to an LLC called Cornerstone Holdings. Mason remained as a tenant with rights to occupy, but the property legally belonged to his company. Vanessa stared at the document, her hands shaking with rage now rather than fear. He'd played her. All this time, she thought she was the one running the long con, but Mason had protected himself from the beginning. Her phone rang, Lily calling from her after-school program. "Mom, the card you gave me for emergencies isn't working. The vending machine rejected it, and when I tried to get money from the ATM, it said account restricted." "It's fine, honey," Vanessa lied, her mind racing. "Just a mix-up with the bank. I'll pick you up in 20 minutes. After hanging up, Vanessa walked through the house that was no longer hers, trying to formulate a plan. She needed to find Mason, needed to regain control of the situation before everything fell apart. Without access to his money, the Rejuvenate deal would collapse. Brendan would be furious. As she passed the living room, something caught her eye. A framed photo was missing from the mantel. It had been Mason's favorite. The 3 of them at the coast last summer, Brick digging in the sand beside them, all smiling as if they were a real family. The space where it had stood was conspicuously empty, with no dust outline suggesting it had been recently removed. That photo had been gone for some time, she realized. How had she not noticed? Outside, rain began to fall more heavily, drumming against the windows of a house that was suddenly, terrifyingly, no longer a safe harbor. Chapter 5. Puppet Master Strings. For 3 days, Mason watched Vanessa unravel from the comfort of his safe house command center. The surveillance system he'd installed throughout their home, originally as a security measure when they traveled, now served a different purpose, allowing him to monitor her increasing desperation as she discovered each new layer of his preparations. He observed her frantic phone calls to Brendan Norwood, watched her tearing through filing cabinets looking for financial documents, saw her attempt to access his email accounts. The cameras caught her crying in frustration, raging at her own reflection, and finally, drinking herself to sleep on the second night. Beside him, Wanda shook her head at the scene playing out on the monitors. She's looking for your weaknesses, not acknowledging her mistakes. Classic narcissist. Mason nodded, scratching Brick behind the ears. She won't find any weaknesses to exploit. Not anymore. On the third day, Mason initiated the next phase. A single phone call to Oliver set it in motion. Proceed with Operation Clear Books. At Cornerstone Development's headquarters, a team of forensic accountants, ostensibly conducting a routine audit, began reviewing every transaction involving Vanessa's charity organizations. By mid-afternoon, they had compiled a comprehensive report documenting the fraudulent activities Roth had uncovered. Inflated invoices, phantom services, circular transactions designed to launder insurance payouts. Simultaneously, Terrence Walsh filed a series of documents with the county court. A petition for divorce citing abandonment and infidelity. An emergency injunction freezing any assets connected to Vanessa pending investigation of financial improprieties, and a formal complaint with the state insurance commissioner detailing the fraud scheme. The final touch was delivered by courier to the offices of the Portland Tribune, a package containing select surveillance photos of Vanessa and Brendan, along with documentation of their business relationship and timeline of suspicious insurance claims. An anonymous tip suggested that the respected businessman and prominent charity organizer were involved in a multi-million-dollar fraud operation. By evening, the storm Mason had methodically engineered was breaking over Vanessa's head. Her phone vibrated constantly with notifications. The bank confirming the asset freeze, Brendan demanding explanations, the newspaper requesting comment, and finally, Terrence Walsh formally serving divorce papers. Through the surveillance cameras, Mason watched her world implode in real time. The moment that gave him the most satisfaction came when she attempted to call her attorney, only to discover the retainer she thought she'd paid had never been processed due to the banking error Mason had orchestrated weeks earlier. "You've thought of everything," Wanda commented, watching Vanessa collapse onto the sofa, head in her hands. "Not quite everything," Mason replied, his expression hardening as he pulled up a different set of surveillance images on his tablet. Photos of Lily, taken earlier that day. Unlike Vanessa, whose betrayal had been calculated and cold, Lily's "I hope you die" had come from a different place. A teenager's loyalty to her mother, perhaps, or simply the cruelty born of adolescent insecurity. Mason had not forgotten the words, but his plans for his stepdaughter were more nuanced. The photos showed Lily at school, looking withdrawn and anxious. Additional images captured her eating lunch alone, checking her phone repeatedly, shoulders hunched defensively. According to the private investigator's report, rumors about her mother and Brendan Norwood were already circulating among parents, and by extension, among students. "The girl needs to understand consequences," Wanda said, her voice hard. She chose her side. Mason studied the photo of Lily for a long moment. She's 17, caught in her mother's web. "I'm not excusing what she said, but she deserves a chance to make her own choices." He pulled up a draft email addressed to Lily's school counselor, outlining concerns about her home situation and requesting support services. Attached was a prepaid college fund in Lily's name, money Vanessa couldn't touch, with a stipulation that it would become available upon her graduation. "You're still protecting her, after what she said?" Wanda seemed incredulous. "I'm giving her an option her mother never would. What she does with it is her choice." Mason sent the email, then returned his attention to the main surveillance feed. Vanessa was on the phone again, her expression shifting from desperation to calculation. Mason increased the volume. "Doesn't matter what they think they know," she was saying to Brendan. "We just need to stay aligned on our story. The charity work was legitimate. We can explain the meetings as business development. Your lawyer is better than whatever discount attorney Mason has hired." Mason smiled thinly at the irony. Terrence Walsh was one of Portland's most respected attorneys, his services far from discount. Vanessa had never bothered to learn the details of Mason's business operations or connections, seeing only what she wanted to see. A simple contractor she could manipulate and use. "Let her think she still has control," Mason said quietly. "Tomorrow, She learns what it means to lose everything. Chapter 6. Collapsing Foundations. The Portland Tribune's front page headline sent shockwaves through the city's business and philanthropic communities. Charity fraud investigation targets prominent organizer and developer. Below the headline, photos of Vanessa and Brendan Norwood entering a hotel together left little doubt about the nature of their relationship. The article detailed allegations of insurance fraud, misappropriation of charitable donations, and potential tax evasion, citing documents provided by an anonymous source. By mid-morning, Vanessa had been asked to resign from 3 charity boards. By noon, the state insurance commissioner's office had announced a formal investigation into Pinnacle Properties and all associated entities. By 2 p.m., Brendan Norwood's investors were publicly distancing themselves from him. Mason tracked these developments from his temporary office at Cornerstone's rarely used secondary location across town. The main headquarters, where Vanessa might think to look for him, continued operations as usual, but Mason directed everything from this shadow command post, his injured body healing as his revenge plan unfolded with mechanical precision. Norwood's attorney called again. Oliver reported, entering with a stack of permits for Mason's signature. They're offering to collaborate on a joint statement clarifying the misunderstanding. Mason didn't look up from the blueprints he was reviewing. No response necessary. And the bank confirmed the lien on his Riverside Heights development has been processed. Construction loans are suspended pending the fraud investigation. This drew a thin smile from Mason. Riverside Heights was Norwood's attempt to compete with Mason's Riverside Plaza project, the very site where Mason's accident had occurred. The suspension of financing would likely kill the development entirely. His business partners are getting nervous, Oliver continued. 2 have already contacted us about potentially working with Cornerstone instead. Tell them we'll consider proposals next quarter, after this unfortunate situation has been resolved. Mason instructed. We don't poach clients. We just happen to be available when their previous arrangements fall through. Oliver nodded, then hesitated. There's one more thing. Vanessa tried to gain access to the main office this morning. Security followed protocol and denied her entry, but she made quite a scene. Claimed you were having a mental breakdown and she needed to access company records for your medical care. Mason's jaw tightened. She's getting desperate. Desperate enough to try finding you here. We should increase security. Already done. Mason gestured to the monitors, showing feeds from cameras positioned throughout the building. But I won't be staying long. The final phase begins tonight. After Oliver left, Mason pulled up the surveillance feed from his former home. Vanessa was pacing in the living room, phone pressed to her ear, gesturing frantically. The audio captured fragments of her conversation with her mother. Don't care what it looks like, Mom. I need somewhere to stay. Yes, I know it's been years, but... No, Lily would come with me, of course. Fine. She ended the call and hurled the phone across the room, narrowly missing a crystal vase Mason had given her for their anniversary. Her face contorted with rage as she grabbed the vase and smashed it against the fireplace. Mason watched impassively. The house, like everything else, had been prepared for this moment. The valuable items had been quietly removed and replaced with convincing replicas. The original artwork, antiques, and family heirlooms were safely stored in a warehouse under Cornerstone's ownership. His phone buzzed with a text from Roth, the private investigator. Subject B, Norwood, just left attorney's office. En route to Subject A's, Vanessa's, location. ETA, 15 minutes. Mason switched to the exterior camera view and settled in to watch. This confrontation had been inevitable. 2 cornered rats turning on each other when the trap snapped shut. Brendan Norwood's Jaguar pulled into the driveway 17 minutes later. He stormed to the door, his normally polished appearance disheveled, tie askew. Vanessa let him in, immediately launching into what appeared to be accusations based on her aggressive gestures. Mason increased the volume. Your fault. You said the paper trail was clean. Vanessa was shouting. My fault? You're the one who couldn't keep your husband distracted. Brendan fired back. If you'd visited him in the hospital like a normal wife, he might not have gotten suspicious. Don't you dare blame me. I did everything we planned. It's your sloppy bookkeeping that got us caught. Brendan ran his hands through his hair in exasperation. It doesn't matter now. My investors are pulling out. The Riverside Heights project is dead. 2 years of work gone. What about Rejuvenate? We can still salvage that if. Are you delusional? Rejuvenate is over. Everything is over. Brendan's voice dropped to a dangerous quiet. Unless you can get Mason to call off the dogs. Vanessa's laugh was brittle. Call off the dogs? I can't even find him. He's disappeared with all our money, turned my own charity board against me, and filed for divorce. He's systematically destroying everything. Then you need to find him. Reason with him. You're his wife. Use that. Ex-wife soon enough. And you clearly don't know Mason if you think he'll listen to reason now. Vanessa collapsed onto the sofa. He was always the sentimental one, the loyal one. I never thought he had this in him. This calculated vengeance. Brendan paced the room, stopping to pour himself a drink from the bar cart. What about the girl? His stepdaughter. Could we use her somehow? Mason's hands clenched at this, knuckles white. Vanessa shook her head. Lily's already suffering enough. The kids at school know everything. Someone sent screenshots of the newspaper article to the whole class. She locked herself in her room and won't come out. I'm not suggesting we harm her, Brendan said impatiently. But if Mason cared about her, maybe that's an angle. Her future, her college fund. Already tried. Apparently, he set up a separate trust for her education years ago. Ironclad, can't be touched. Mason allowed himself a small smile at this. Even in her desperation, there were lines Vanessa wouldn't cross when it came to Lily. It was perhaps her only redeeming quality. As he watched them continue to argue, casting blame and desperately searching for escape routes, Mason felt neither satisfaction nor pity, only a cold certainty that justice was being served. These are people who had wished for his death or suffering for their convenience. Now, they were experiencing the consequences of that wish. His phone rang. Terrence Walsh calling with updates on the legal proceedings. The judge granted the emergency financial discovery order, Terrence reported. We can now legally access all of Norwood's business records and Vanessa's personal accounts. The insurance commissioner is cooperating fully. Good. And the house. Eviction notice can be served as early as tomorrow, but I recommended waiting until Friday. Gives us the weekend to change locks if necessary. Mason considered this. Do it tomorrow. I want this finished. After ending the call, Mason turned off the surveillance monitors. He'd seen enough. Tomorrow would mark the end of this chapter. Vanessa and Lily would be removed from the house that was never truly theirs, and Mason would reclaim the life that had been built on his hard work and principles. What happened to them afterward was of no concern to him. The mercy he might once have shown had died in a hospital room, killed by 6 words. You're not worth the gas money. Chapter 7. Calculated Demolition. The eviction notice arrived at 8:07 a.m., delivered by a stern-faced sheriff's deputy who remained professionally detached as Vanessa's protests escalated from incredulous to hysterical. The official document gave her 24 hours to vacate the premises, citing the property's legal ownership by Cornerstone Holdings LLC and the termination of her right to occupy as the spouse of an authorized tenant. This is my home. Vanessa's voice carried clearly through the surveillance system. My husband can't just throw me out. Ma'am, according to county records, this property hasn't been in Mr. Hargrove's personal name for several years. The deputy explained with practiced patience. The corporate owner has the legal right to terminate occupancy, and the court has upheld that right. I suggest you use your remaining time to pack essential belongings. After the deputy left, Vanessa collapsed onto the foyer bench, the eviction notice trembling in her hands. For several minutes, she sat motionless, staring at nothing. Then, with sudden fury, she grabbed a decorative crystal bowl from the entrance table and hurled it against the wall. Miles away, in his safe house command center, Mason watched her break down with clinical detachment. The destruction of replaceable items had been anticipated. It was why anything of true value or sentimental importance had been removed weeks earlier. Should we send security to prevent further damage? Wanda asked, wincing as Vanessa moved to the living room and began overturning furniture. Mason shook his head. Let her vent. The house is insured, and nothing there matters anymore. His phone buzzed with a text from Terrence. Insurance commissioner authorized fraud investigation team to seize records from all Norwood properties. Happening now. Mason forwarded this information to Roth, who had been monitoring Brendan Norwood. The reply came quickly. Subject B, just received notice. Attempting to access secure storage unit registered to Shell Company. Surveillance in place. Everything was proceeding according to plan. The authorities, armed with the evidence Mason had provided, were closing in on the fraudulent scheme. Norwood, predictably, was trying to hide or destroy additional evidence. But Mason had anticipated this move weeks ago, ensuring the storage facility had upgraded its security cameras and hired an off-duty police officer as additional security, all funded anonymously through Cornerstone. Lily's home, Wanda noted, pointing to one of the surveillance feeds showing the teenager entering the house, backpack slung over one shoulder. Mason increased the volume as Lily found her mother in the chaos of the destroyed living room. "Mom? What happened? What are you doing?" Lily's voice was small, frightened. Vanessa turned to her daughter, mascara streaking down her flushed face. "We're being evicted. We have until tomorrow morning to get out. Mason, your wonderful stepfather, he's taking everything." Lily stood frozen, surveying the destruction. "Where will we go?" "I don't know." Vanessa snapped, then softened at her daughter's flinch. "I'm sorry, honey. We'll figure it out. Go pack your things, clothes, school supplies, anything important." "What about the rest of our stuff?" "We'll have to leave it. There's no time, and nowhere to put it anyway." As Lily disappeared upstairs, Vanessa pulled out her phone and dialed Brendan. Mason split the screen to show both feeds, Vanessa in the living room and Norwood hurriedly removing files from the storage unit under Roth's distant surveillance. "We're being evicted," Vanessa said without preamble when Brendan answered. "Tomorrow morning. I need somewhere for Lily and me to stay." Brendan's response was clear through both his body language and Vanessa's reaction. "What do you mean you can't help? This involves you too." Vanessa's voice rose. "Oh, I see. When things were going well, we were partners. Now that it's falling apart, I'm on my own." The conversation deteriorated further, ending with Vanessa hurling her phone at the wall with enough force to shatter its screen. Mason switched to the upstairs feed, where Lily was in her bedroom, methodically packing a suitcase while tears streamed down her face. Unlike her mother's chaotic rage, Lily's response was quiet devastation. She carefully selected clothes, textbooks, and a few personal items, including a framed photo of her biological father. Mason noticed what she left behind. The expensive jewelry he'd given her for birthdays, the designer clothes Vanessa had insisted were necessary for social standing, the high-end electronics that had been Christmas gifts. Instead, she packed a worn stuffed bear that had been hers since childhood, a journal, and a small wooden box containing what Mason knew were letters from her grandmother. Something unexpected stirred in Mason's chest as he watched this teenager, who had wished death upon him, make pragmatic choices in crisis. There was a resilience there, a core of practicality that reminded him of himself at that age, after his father had walked out and left the family scrambling. "She's not like her mother," Wanda observed, following his gaze. "No," Mason agreed. "She's not." He pulled up a document on his tablet, the trust he'd established for Lily's education. With a few taps, he made an amendment, adding a provision for living expenses to be released immediately rather than upon graduation. It wouldn't solve all her problems, but would ensure she had options beyond whatever desperate situation Vanessa dragged her into. "You're still helping her." Wanda's tone held equal parts disbelief and disapproval. After what she said, Mason met his sister's gaze steadily. "I'm not helping Vanessa. I'm giving Lily a chance to make different choices. And if she chooses to stand with her mother against you, then that's her decision, and these funds will wait until she's ready to use them for education. But she deserves the opportunity to decide for herself." Mason returned his attention to the surveillance feeds, watching as Vanessa began half-heartedly packing her own belongings, focusing primarily on jewelry, designer clothing, and expensive cosmetics. The contrast between mother and daughter could not have been more stark. By evening, Roth reported that Brendan Norwood had been detained for questioning by the insurance fraud investigators after being caught removing documents from the storage unit. His attorney was attempting to secure bail, but given the mounting evidence and risk of flight, it seemed unlikely he would be released quickly. Meanwhile, Vanessa had called everyone in her social circle seeking temporary accommodations, only to discover that her former friends were suddenly unavailable or uncomfortable getting involved. The charity scandal had made her toxic, and Vanessa Reynolds Hargrove, once the darling of Portland society, found herself without allies. At 9:14 p.m., Mason received a notification that an unknown number was attempting to call him. He knew before answering that it would be Vanessa, likely using Lily's phone since her own was destroyed. He considered ignoring it, but after a moment's reflection, he accepted the call. "Mason." Her voice was ragged, but it found its manipulative sweetness again. "Thank God. I've been so worried about you." "Have you?" It wasn't a question. "Of course. After your accident. And then you disappeared from the hospital. I've been beside myself. Where are you? We need to talk." "We have nothing to discuss, Vanessa." "Don't say that. I know you're upset about things you might have heard or seen, but there are explanations. If you just come home." "It's not your home," Mason interrupted, his voice cold. "It never was. And neither was I." A pause, then her tone hardened. "So that's it? 5 years of marriage, and you're throwing me and Lily onto the street? Is that the kind of man you are?" "You made it very clear what kind of man I am to you when you told me I wasn't worth the gas money to visit in the hospital. When you hoped I would die fast or heal quick because I was an inconvenience." The silence stretched between them, heavy with unspoken accusations. "That was a mistake," Vanessa finally said, her voice small. "I was stressed. I didn't mean it. The mistake was mine, Vanessa. I believed you loved me. I believed we were building something together. But you were just using me as a stepping stone to something you thought was better. Mason, please. For Lily's sake, if nothing else. I've already provided for Lily. Check your email. There's information about a trust fund that will cover her living and educational expenses. It's for her, not you." Another pause, longer this time. When Vanessa spoke again, any pretense of warmth had vanished. "You son of a bitch. You planned all of this, didn't you? From the beginning. The house, the accounts, everything." "I planned for contingencies," Mason corrected. "I hoped I'd never need them. You've destroyed everything. My reputation, my future, everything we built." "I built." Mason's voice remained steady. "You were just along for the ride, looking for the next opportunity. Well, you found it with Norwood. How's that working out for you?" The bitter laugh that escaped her held no humor. "He's being questioned by fraud investigators as we speak. No help there. Funny how that works. What do you want, Mason? An apology? Begging? Tell me what it will take to call off this vendetta." Mason considered her question seriously. "There's nothing you can offer me, Vanessa. Nothing I want from you. Everyone has a price." Desperation crept into her voice. "Not everyone. That's something you never understood about me." Mason paused, then added, "The locksmith will arrive at noon tomorrow to change the locks. I suggest you be gone by then." He ended the call before she could respond, setting down the phone with a steady hand that belied the tumult of emotions beneath his composed exterior. It wasn't satisfaction he felt, exactly, nor was it closure. It was simply the knowledge that he had reclaimed control of his life from those who had tried to use and discard him. Tomorrow, the house would be empty of Vanessa's presence. The day after, the legal proceedings would continue dismantling what remained of her and Norwood's fraudulent operations. Mason's company would survive, his finances secure, his reputation intact, and Vanessa and Brendan Norwood would reap exactly what they had sown. Chapter 8. Unexpected Salvage. The morning of the eviction dawned clear and cool, autumn sunlight filtering through the trees surrounding the safe house. Mason had slept poorly, his dreams filled with fragmented images. The hospital room, Vanessa's voice over the phone, Lily's face twisted with hatred. He rose early, showered to ease the lingering stiffness in his healing body, and brewed coffee while Brick watched him with devoted eyes. "Just a few more hours, boy," Mason told the dog, scratching behind his ears. "Then we can go home." His phone buzzed with a text from the security company he'd hired to oversee the eviction. In position. No movement at residence yet. Mason checked the surveillance feeds, confirming what the security team reported. The house appeared quiet, though lights were visible in Vanessa's bedroom and Lily's room. They were awake, at least. As he watched, Lily emerged from her room, fully dressed, dragging a suitcase and carrying a backpack. She paused at her mother's door, knocked briefly, then continued downstairs without waiting for a response. In the kitchen, she made toast, ate mechanically, and washed her dish, a small act of normalcy in a collapsing world. Mason found himself wondering where they would go. Despite Vanessa's desperate calls the previous day, it seemed no one had offered shelter. Her mother lived in Arizona and had apparently refused to help. Brendan Norwood remained in custody. Mason had effectively isolated Vanessa from her social support network through the calculated exposure of her fraudulent activities. It was all according to plan, yet watching Lily's solitary breakfast, he felt an unexpected twinge of, not regret, exactly, but awareness of collateral damage. His phone rang, Roth calling with an update. "Sir, there's a development you should know about. Vanessa contacted Dennis Patterson last night. Dennis Patterson, Lily's biological father, the pharmaceutical rep in Seattle who sent expensive gifts but rarely visited." "How do you know this?" Mason asked. "I've been monitoring her email since she destroyed her phone. She sent him a long message about the situation, asking for help. He replied this morning, offering to take Lily but not Vanessa." Mason absorbed this information, turning it over in his mind. And Vanessa's response? "She hasn't replied yet, but given her limited options. Keep me updated," Mason instructed, ending the call. He switched back to the surveillance feed. Vanessa had finally emerged from her bedroom, wearing designer jeans and a cashmere sweater, dressed for impact rather than practicality, even now. She joined Lily in the kitchen, pouring coffee and launching into what appeared to be a strategy session based on her animated gestures. Mason increased the volume to hear their conversation. "Contacted your father last night," Vanessa was saying. "He's willing to take you in Seattle until this situation is resolved." Lily looked up sharply. "Just me? What about you?" Vanessa waved dismissively. "I'll figure something out. Stephanie might let me stay with her for a few days." "Stephanie from the Garden Society? Didn't she publicly resign from your committee yesterday?" "That was just for show. She understands how these things work." Vanessa sipped her coffee. "The important thing is getting you somewhere stable. Your father will arrange your transfer to a school in Seattle." Lily set down her mug, her expression hardening. "So you're shipping me off to Dad, who I see maybe twice a year while you try to salvage your reputation? Find another man to support you. Don't take that tone with me, young lady. I'm doing what's best for you." "What's best for me?" Lily's voice rose. "You haven't done what's best for me since we moved in with Mason. It was always about your charities, your social standing, your boyfriend." Vanessa's hand struck out, slapping Lily across the face with enough force to snap her head to the side. "Don't you dare. Everything I've done has been for us, for our future." Lily touched her cheek, eyes wide with shock that quickly hardened into something colder. "No, everything you've done has been for yourself. Mason was right about you." "Mason?" Vanessa's voice dropped dangerously. "When did you talk to Mason?" "He called me last night after you went to bed. Told me about the trust fund for my education and living expenses. Told me I had options besides following you into whatever scheme you cook up next." Vanessa's face contorted with fury. "And you believe him? After what he's done to us?" "After what you did to him," Lily corrected. "I heard you, Mom. On the phone that day when he was in the hospital. You told him to die fast or heal quick because visiting him was too much trouble while you were busy with Brendan. You don't understand adult relationships." "I understand loyalty," Lily cut her off. "I understand that Mason never missed one of my school events, even when you did. That he helped me with homework, drove me to friends' houses, and made sure I had everything I needed. And I told him to die." The last words came out as a broken whisper, tears finally spilling down Lily's cheeks. "I told him to die because I thought I had to choose your side. But you don't care about sides unless they benefit you." Vanessa stared at her daughter, momentarily speechless. Then her practical nature reasserted itself. This is all very dramatic, but it doesn't change our situation. We need to be out of here by noon, and we need somewhere to go. Your father is offering you a place. Take it. Lily wiped her tears, a new resolve straightening her shoulders. I'm not going to Seattle. I'm going to use the trust fund Mason set up to get an apartment near school so I can finish my senior year here. You're 17. You can't live alone. Watch me. Lily turned away, heading back upstairs. I've already talked to Ms. Winters, the counselor. She's helping me find a place and arranging for legal emancipation. Watching this unfold, Mason felt something shift inside him. Not forgiveness for Lily's cruel words in that hospital call, but a recognition of her potential to be better than the parent who had raised her. It was the same potential he'd seen in himself at 17, determined to break the cycle of his father's abandonment. His phone buzzed again, Terrence Walsh calling this time. Mason, the judge signed the final injunction against Norwood Properties. All assets frozen pending the complete fraud investigation. And Norwood himself? Still in custody. Bail was denied based on flight risk. His passport has been flagged. Good. What about the divorce proceedings? On track. Given the evidence of infidelity and financial misconduct, Vanessa will have little ground to contest anything. The prenuptial agreement you had the foresight to sign will be enforced. Mason nodded, though Terrence couldn't see it. And the foundation for construction worker families? Paperwork is complete. Cornerstone's contribution has been processed, and a matching fund from your business associates came through this morning. The foundation will be able to provide support for injured workers and their families immediately. This has been the most personal part of Mason's plan, creating something positive from his experience. The foundation would ensure that other construction workers who suffered injuries would have financial support for their families during recovery, preventing the kind of vulnerability he had experienced. Thank you, Terrence, for everything. After ending the call, Mason returned his attention to the surveillance feeds. Lily was in her room, speaking on the phone, presumably to the school counselor about her emancipation plans. Vanessa was in the master bedroom, haphazardly packing expensive clothing and jewelry. The security team sent another update. Moving truck arrived. 2 associates of Mrs. Hargrove helping load personal items. Mason switched to the exterior camera, recognizing the associates as young men from Vanessa's charity committee, probably the only people still willing to help her. They began loading suitcases and boxes into a rented moving truck under Vanessa's supervision. Lily emerged with her suitcase and backpack, bypassing her mother and speaking directly to one of the young men, who nodded and placed her luggage separately in the truck cab rather than the storage area. At 11:47 a.m., 13 minutes before the locksmith was scheduled to arrive, the moving truck pulled away from the property. Vanessa departed in her Mercedes, following the truck, while Lily rode in the cab with one of the young men. Mason watched them go, feeling neither triumph nor regret, only a sense of a chapter closing. He switched off the surveillance system and turned to Wanda, who had arrived to drive him home. It's done, he said simply. Chapter 9. Foundations Rebuilt. 6 months after the eviction, Mason stood on the rooftop terrace of the completed Riverside Plaza, surveying downtown Portland spread before him. The autumn days, clear skies, offered views all the way to Mount Hood in the distance, its snow-capped peak gleaming in the afternoon sun. Below, workers were dismantling scaffolding and cleanup crews were preparing the building for its grand opening next week. Quite a view, Diego said, joining him at the railing. The foreman's arms still bore a slight stiffness from the accident, but like Mason, he had recovered well. Worth all the trouble. Mason nodded, allowing himself a moment of pride. Riverside Plaza was Cornerstone's crowning achievement, a mixed-use development that would house offices, high-end retail, residential units, and a community center named after Mason's father, who had taught in the construction trade. The final inspections are complete, Diego continued. Everything passed with flying colors. The first tenants can begin moving in on schedule, and the safety protocols? Implemented throughout. Every contractor and subcontractor has been certified on the new standards. The Hargrove Safety Initiative is officially an industry benchmark. This was perhaps the most meaningful outcome of the past 6 months' upheaval. After his recovery, Mason had channeled his experience into creating comprehensive safety reforms for the construction industry, beginning with his own company and extending through partnerships and advocacy. The scaffold manufacturer had ultimately been held accountable for the defective equipment, resulting in industry-wide recalls and improved testing requirements. Mason's phone vibrated in his pocket. Checking it, he saw a text from Wanda. Just left the courthouse. Final divorce decree signed and entered. It's officially over. A weight he hadn't realized he was still carrying lifted from his shoulders. The divorce proceedings had dragged on longer than anticipated, with Vanessa attempting various tactics to secure a more favorable settlement despite the prenuptial agreement and evidence of her misconduct. In the end, she had received nothing beyond what the prenup stipulated, a modest cash settlement that would sustain her for perhaps a year if she lived frugally, something Vanessa had never learned to do. Good news, Diego asked, noting Mason's expression. Just confirmation that the past stays in the past, Mason replied. Let's finish the tour. As they descended to inspect the lower levels, Mason's thoughts drifted to what he had learned about Vanessa and Brendan Norwood in the intervening months. The fraud investigation had revealed a scheme more extensive than initially suspected, involving multiple properties and insurance companies over a 3-year period. Norwood had eventually accepted a plea deal, providing testimony against other conspirators in exchange for a reduced sentence. He was currently serving 2 years in a minimum security facility, his business empire dismantled, his reputation destroyed. Vanessa had avoided criminal charges through a combination of careful positioning as a duped participant and Norwood's reluctance to implicate her fully, perhaps his only honorable act. She had moved to Arizona, living with her reluctant mother while attempting to rebuild some semblance of her former life. According to Wanda's occasional reports, Vanessa had found work as an event coordinator at a mid-tier hotel, a significant step down from her previous social standing, but consistent with her actual skills. Mason had maintained no direct contact with her beyond what was legally necessary for the divorce proceedings. Her occasional attempts to appeal to his emotions or sense of shared history had met with silence. The woman who had wished him dead or quickly healed as a matter of convenience no longer existed in his world, except as a cautionary memory. Lily's path had taken a more interesting turn. True to her word, she had pursued emancipation with the help of her school counselor. Mason had not interfered directly, but had ensured through Terrence that the trust fund provided sufficient financial support for independent living. Lily had found a small apartment near her school, maintained her grades despite the turmoil, and was now applying to colleges with the encouragement of her counselors. 3 months after the eviction, Mason had received an unexpected email from Lily. I don't expect forgiveness for what I said. There's no excuse good enough. But I want you to know I'm sorry, and I'm grateful for the trust fund that gave me a chance to make my own choices. Thank you for seeing something in me worth saving, even when I didn't see it in you. He had replied with simple acknowledgement of her message and confirmation that the trust would continue to support her educational pursuits regardless of which college she chose. It wasn't forgiveness. Mason wasn't sure he had that in him after the depth of betrayal he'd experienced, but it was a recognition that people could choose different paths than those set by their parents or past mistakes. After completing the building inspection, Mason returned to his office in the Cornerstone headquarters. The company had not just survived the tumult of the past 6 months, but had thrived, with 3 new major projects under contract and a reputation for integrity that stood in stark contrast to Norwood's disgrace. As evening approached, Mason finished reviewing the final preparations for the Riverside Plaza opening ceremony. His assistant knocked briefly before entering. Everything set for next week, Mr. Hargrove. The mayor confirmed his attendance, and the press packets are ready for distribution. Thank you, Heather. Any word from the Hargrove Foundation Committee? Yes, sir. The first round of family support grants has been processed. 5 families of injured workers will receive assistance this month. Mason nodded with satisfaction. The foundation, funded by a portion of Cornerstone's profits and matching contributions from business associates, was perhaps the most meaningful outcome of his experience. It ensured that other families wouldn't face the kind of abandonment he had endured. After Heather left, Mason prepared to head home. His house, the one Vanessa had been evicted from, had been renovated over the past months, erasing her presence and the damage from her final rage. New furniture, new color schemes, a completely redesigned master suite that held no memories of their shared life. It was his space now, reflecting his tastes and priorities rather than Vanessa's social aspirations. Brick greeted him enthusiastically when he arrived home, the chocolate lab's devotion undiminished by time or circumstances. Mason took him for their usual evening walk through the neighborhood, nodding to neighbors who had long since stopped asking about Vanessa or expressing awkward sympathy. Later, sitting on his back deck with a glass of whiskey and Brick at his feet, Mason watched the sunset paint the sky in shades of orange and purple. His phone buzzed with a text from Roth. Final surveillance discontinued as instructed. All equipment removed from Reynolds' residence in Arizona. Mason sent a brief acknowledgement. He had maintained minimal surveillance on Vanessa in the months following the separation, not out of lingering attachment, but as a security measure to ensure she didn't attempt any desperate retaliation. Now, with the divorce finalized and her life firmly established far from Portland, that precaution was no longer necessary. He was free, truly free, in a way he hadn't been even before meeting Vanessa. The experience had stripped away any illusions about trust freely given, any naivety about love and loyalty. What remained was a clearer vision of his own worth, his own principles, and the boundaries he would never again allow to be crossed. The cold calculation that had driven his revenge had transformed into something more sustainable, a protective armor around his rebuilt life. Mason Hargrove would never again be vulnerable to those who saw him as merely a resource to be exploited, a stepping stone to their ambitions, or an inconvenience to be discarded. As darkness fell, he thought of Vanessa's desperate scream captured on video by his sister months earlier. He took everything, even the dog. No, Mason reflected, scratching Brick behind the ears. He hadn't taken everything from her. He had simply reclaimed what was rightfully his dignity, his future, his peace of mind. Vanessa had lost only what she had tried to steal, and the dog had always known where his true loyalty belonged. Tomorrow would bring new projects, new challenges, new opportunities to build something that would last. Mason Hargrove had emerged from betrayal not just surviving, but reconstructed, stronger, wiser, and uncompromising in his boundaries. Some debts could never be repaid, some betrayals never forgiven. Mason had made peace with that truth, and in doing so, had found a foundation that could not be shaken. And there you have it. Another story comes to an end. What did you think? I'd love to hear your thoughts in the comments below. If you enjoy this story, consider joining our community by subscribing. It means the world to us. For more stories like this one, check out the recommended videos on screen, and I'll see you there.